Have you ever just looked at the world and wondered how a group of smart, totally reasonable people can suddenly become, well, an irrational mob? It's a weird phenomenon, right? Well, over 100 years ago, a guy named Gustave Le Bon wrote this definitive and honestly pretty terrifying user's manual on group psychology. So let's dive into his classic work, The Crowd, and see how it just might explain the crazy world we're all living in today.
Right off the bat, Le Bon does not pull any punches. He hits us with this startling claim. You gather a bunch of brilliant people in one place, and the result isn't the superbrain, it's the exact opposite. And that one idea, right there, just flips everything we think we know about group intelligence completely on its head. And that really brings us to the central mystery we're going to unpack here. What is this strange magic, this weird alchemy that takes thoughtful individuals and turns them into an impulsive, unthinking mass? I mean, how on earth does that even happen? Le Bon was convinced he had the answer.
To solve this, we first have to wrap our heads around what Le Bon called the paradox of the crowd. This is, without a doubt, the core of his entire theory.
So, here's the crucial point. When we merge into a crowd, all of our individual smarts, our unique personalities, they get watered down. And what's left? Only the most basic, mediocre, and unconscious qualities that we all share. It's like the best parts of us get erased and just the average common denominator takes over.
Okay, so how exactly does this new, kind of dumber mind actually come into being? Well, Le Bon doesn't just guess. He outlines a very specific psychological process.
First things first, he makes his really key distinction. A crowd isn't just a bunch of people standing around. A psychological crowd is something else entirely. Think of it as a new, temporary being with its own mind. It's a state where your individual thoughts and feelings are completely swallowed up by a single unified current. You stop being you.
And this isn't random. He says it's governed by what he calls the law of the mental unity of crowds. It's this principle that explains how all these separate people can fuse into one being. Now, what's really interesting is how Le Bon says this fusion happens. He breaks it down.
He lays it out in 3 steps. First step, anonymity. When you're in a crowd, you're faceless. This gives you this feeling of invincible power, and suddenly that little voice of personal responsibility just vanishes. Second, contagion. Emotions and actions spread through the group like a virus. It's almost impossible not to catch the feeling. And third, suggestibility. The individual basically enters a hypnotic state, losing their own free will and just becoming an automaton, ready to follow any suggestion.
So once this collective mind is born, what's it actually like? What are its defining characteristics? What's its personality?
And this chart just lays the transformation bare, doesn't it? An isolated person can be rational, in control, responsible, but in a crowd, they become a creature of instinct, a barbarian. They're impulsive, irresponsible, and their critical thinking just goes right out the window. They'll believe anything. It's a really shocking downgrade.
Let's look a little closer at these traits. The crowd mind is impulsive and irritable. It's incredibly gullible. Le Bon actually says that for a crowd, the improbable does not exist. Anything is possible. Its feelings are always super simple and totally exaggerated. A tiny suspicion instantly becomes absolute certainty. It knows no doubt. And it's intolerant, respecting brute force way more than reason or kindness. But here's a really critical point. The crowd isn't automatically evil. Because it runs purely on suggestion, its actions depend entirely on the kind of suggestions it's getting. So, it can be guided to commit the most horrible acts, or to perform incredible feats of heroism and self-sacrifice. The crowd itself is just raw, undirected power.
Which, of course, brings us to the most practical and maybe the most chilling part of Le Bon's work. If the crowd is just this powerful vessel, how do you steer it? How do you become its master? Le Bon is crystal clear on this. Leaders aren't just helpful, they are absolutely essential. He describes a crowd as a servile flock that instinctively needs a master to obey. Without a leader to give it a will, a crowd is just a chaotic, powerless mess.
So, what's in this leader's toolkit? The first and most basic tool is affirmation. A leader has to make simple, bold statements. No room for reasoning, no proof, just pure, assertive declarations presented as fact.
But just saying something once isn't going to cut it. That's where the second tool comes in, repetition. The leader has to repeat that same affirmation again and again and again. Through that constant repetition, the idea embeds itself deep in the unconscious mind of the crowd until it's just accepted as a proven truth.
So once an idea has been affirmed and repeated, the third mechanism just kicks in automatically.
contagion. The belief starts to spread from person to person, almost organically, creating this powerful current of opinion that becomes nearly impossible to resist.
But listen, none of this works without the one essential ingredient, the secret sauce: prestige. Le Bon says prestige is this kind of mysterious fascination a leader has. It completely paralyzes the crowd's ability to think critically and just fills them with wonder and respect. With prestige, a leader's ideas are never discussed, they're just imposed.
All right, let's bring all this home. Le Bon wrote this at the tail end of the 19th century, but he saw it as a prophecy for the future, for our time.
He predicted that the modern age would become the era of crowds. He saw that the old authorities, the kings and the churches, were all crumbling, and he saw a new power rising to take their place: the popular mind, the masses.
And he was deeply worried about it. He warned that because crowds are totally incapable of reason or foresight, their rule could plunge civilization into a new barbarian phase. In his view, crowds are only good at one thing: destruction. They can tear a civilization down, but they can never, ever build one up.
Which, you have to admit, brings us to a final, unavoidable question for right now. When you look around at our world, a world totally dominated by the instant contagion of social media, by the simple repeated affirmations we call memes, and by the sheer power of online mobs to destroy lives overnight, are we just seeing Le Bon's principles playing out on a scale he could never have possibly imagined? Are we now finally and truly living in the era of crowds?